Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. So welcome back to The Business Behind Your Business. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney. And look, every business owner goes through the stage where they have to negotiate on a deal. They have to negotiate with either an employee or a supplier or a customer. And it's not something that we are comfortable with. For a lot of us, we're not comfortable with it. We're not taught how to do it. You know, the way that we were told to do it in the 80s and 90s was that we had to seek a win-win situation. We had to seek what's the best outcome for me and the best outcome for our customer or supplier. But win-win was not always achievable, and it created a lot of conflict, a lot of angst, and people would avoid that negotiation for that reason. Now, there is a third alternative or a better alternative. And so our guest today, Wendy Minne, is going to help us explore how we can get to those better alternatives and what sort of things we should be focusing on. But Wendy is joining us again. She's been on the podcast before, actually sharing her experience of how she moved from a corporate into running her own business. But what is that business? Well, Wendy's actually a seasoned expert in negotiation, expert in conflict resolution. She has a wealth of experience helping businesses navigate those complex discussions and achieve the meaningful outcomes, those best alternatives or best outcomes for each person. A lot of practical experience working in corporate with some big companies, multinationals, has a deep understanding of how human behavior works, and it does a lot of work with executive coaching, helping other business owners or C-suite executives actually understand what they need to be doing in their jobs on a day-to-day basis. So Wendy, it's great to have you back on the microphone and looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Look, you've got a wealth of experience and you're coaching people on a daily basis on how to be more effective in their roles. But this whole idea of having to negotiate a deal, as I said, back in the 80s and 90s, win-win was the only way we looked at it. There was no other option. It was either win-win or you lost. But things have, I don't know if they've really changed, but I think our approach to negotiations and discussions have changed.
Yes, certainly they have. And, sometimes it's worth investing the time to understand the situation of the other person and what's important to them and what's going to make a deal a good deal to them. Very often we go in with our own mindset and our own presumptions and not actually try to get an understanding of what's important to the other person, because there may be a different way to bring the thing to a conclusion. I did some work with a course with a guy called Fred Kaufman, and he's written a book about conscious business, and he likens negotiation to dancing a tango. You need to turn to see what your partner sees. If you don't actually make that turn, you don't see what the other person sees, and they don't see what you see, because that's where it can bring people much closer together to understand what it looks like for both of them, because the outcome might be different to what you expect, but it might be great for both of you.
So we need to, I guess, change our approach. So you mentioned looking and seeing what the other person is seeing. And I'm reminded by Stephen Covey, who wrote another one of his best-selling books called The Third Alternative. And he was suggesting that synergy is not just about compromise, it's about creating something entirely new that neither party could have achieved on their own. And by doing that, you actually need to be fully aware of what the other party is not just looking for, but the position that they are coming from.
Absolutely. And if you don't have that awareness, you can head off in a direction that's not going to be helpful. A very, very simple example, looking to buy some chairs, and the supplier was anxious because they couldn't deliver them quickly. But we were actually not in a hurry. And, in that situation, you could almost go down the wrong tack of that urgency, which wasn't there, and just through that, the negotiation could have gone in a very different way. So it's sometimes just trying to understand from the point of view of the other person what's important to them, and therefore what's going to look like a reasonable proposal to them when that's taken into account.
So I think in that situation, like you were saying, you're not in an urgent hurry to take delivery of the chairs. Salesperson's worried about, I don't have stock, so I can't sell. And if I do sell, I'm going to create an issue because there's going to be a dissatisfaction with the delivery. But if the salesperson actually stopped and said, okay, what are your expectations? When do you need these chairs by? Because if you need them straight away, I may not be able to deliver this chair, but I could supply a different chair to you.
Exactly. It's putting the options on the table depending on what's needed. But that exploring bit of, what is important. And if you think of bigger negotiations, that if there's not that time to explore exactly what is important, there's a big piece missing from that negotiation.
So, yeah, the pieces that are missing, I think a lot of time we approach negotiation on a once-off time frame that, we're negotiating for this deal, and this deal is the only deal that matters. But if we damage the relationship, it's actually going to affect our ability to come to that negotiating table openly for a further discussion.
Absolutely. And that's where, walking away from a negotiation, whether it fails or not, with a damaged relationship, you're closing an opportunity. Whereas, if you have the right approach and you walk away both respecting each other, whether you do a deal or not, there's future opportunity. And it's really about how do you manage the conversation in such a way that you don't get to that point with the other person where it's like win at all costs or, threatening to walk away. It's to get closer by understanding what's important to them and then sharing what's important to you.
Mm-hmm. And look, what you've just shared with me is, I guess, totally different to a lot of the advice that I was given in my early years in business, and probably the advice you hear from your parents, particularly your dad, because they're the worst offenders at this, that you've got to get the outcome that you were after. And by threatening to walk away, you are then somehow giving yourself some leverage over the person trying to sell to you, that they are going to lose the sale because you're no longer interested. But I think both of those positions are pretty negative, and there is an alternative.
Absolutely. And a lot of the coaching, it's people coming in and just sitting with them and saying, okay, I hear what you're thinking. Now let's take a journey and try and anticipate what the other person's thinking. Where do you think they're coming from? Knowing what you know about them, what's going to be important to them in this deal? And what's the advantage to both of you if you come to a good, mutually acceptable agreement, as opposed to having very tense discussion? One of the biggest things that goes out the window if you have really tense discussions is the chance of doing more business with that person gets less, because it's not comfortable. It doesn't build a trusting relationship. But very often when you're coaching people and you walk around it and help them see what the other side might be seeing, at least that anticipation is there to ask the right questions to get there.
Yeah, so I think it's a very different approach. So you're giving us some good steps or good tips there on how to approach that. So if I'm correct, what I'm hearing is that before we go to that negotiating process, we need to take a bit of time to actually understand, well, who are we actually dealing with, and what are the alternatives that they may be looking for? What's their goal in this discussion? What are they trying to get out of it? Because if we don't understand them correctly, we could be, I guess, limiting ourselves in terms of how we think we can negotiate, but also, like as you mentioned, those future discussions or future contract negotiations where there's potential for future revenue. Because if we offend someone at this stage, I know that we only like to do business with people that we like and trust. If we're offended at the first step of negotiation, I'm not going to come back to you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And expanding the discussion and getting to understand and know more about the other party, it actually opens that door, because once you know more about them and they know more about you and where you're coming from, they may find it much more comfortable to come back to you rather than someone else where they're not sure how that discussion will go. And this is where building up that relationship for the repeat business, for the value you're getting from each other, it starts to play off.
So the whole idea of this is what we probably need to redefine is what we mean by a win. What is the outcome that we're coming to? Because I think sometimes we limit it and say yes, or getting the sale price that we want is the only outcome that we can expect. But there's I guess another acronym. We like acronyms in the business world, of BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. How does that sort of concept play into what you've been telling us about?
It's what you come into the discussion with. It's being ready to not stick to that. It's being ready to actually park that, to be curious, to understand the other person's position, to be comfortable to share a bit of yours. Obviously not going to put everything on the table, but to share a bit of what makes business attractive for you, understand what makes business attractive for them, and see where the mutual benefit sits. And I guess it's the confidence and the trust to share a bit with people rather than trying to hold everything very close to your chest, where it becomes more of wanting to get advantage without helping the other person by providing some support, some information.
Mm-hmm. So I think in the past we would view that by sharing it's an example of our weakness, but I think what you're saying is an example of strength.
Yeah, it could change the relationship completely. And it's not like you've got to share everything. It's just coming closer together and allowing them to see you and you to see them, and what you're looking for, what's important to you, and how to find a good middle road.
Yep. Yeah. So I think if we look at this whole approach to negotiation, I think really what we're talking about here is our I guess our attitude to how we come to the table. So a lot of times we hear tips on negotiation. It's a set of steps, and usually they're quite aggressive steps, or if you get resistance, then go down this path. But how to turn around your prospect into a sale. But I think really we're looking at an attitude here, and I think preparation before we get to the negotiation stage is one of the key steps.
Absolutely. And the preparation might be about the other person. What do you know about them? What more would you need to know? How can you be curious about what actually they are doing, what they're hoping to achieve? And then on your own side, being very clear of where your boundaries are. So, okay, you're going into this, where are your boundaries? And at what point do you say, I don't think we can have a discussion around that area, so that you stay solid on what you want, but also allow a good deal of interchange to see between you what's important on both sides. It's the curiosity to ask the right questions and the willingness to, at some stages, share where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. So the preparation and understanding your client, and I think really in this day and age, we have no excuse for not doing that. There's so much information available. Everybody has a digital footprint, whether they like it or not. There are ways of finding out, what industry does this person work in, how long have they been in business. We can probably even tell who their customers are by looking at referrals and testimonials. So we can learn a lot about a customer before we actually talk to them in the first step. I remember the days where somebody would walk in and they'd have no idea of what our business actually does, yet they've come in with a very fixed goal of how to make a sale and been quite disappointed when they've walked away. So we need to prepare. We need to prepare. We can find out a lot about people, and that also helps us understand where their needs are and what stage they are coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you can't get specifics on that person, you should be able to get some information around that industry. How does that industry normally work? What's important to them? And, at what point would they perceive that this is not helpful for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's more going beyond just the immediate prospect, but actually looking at what's the environment that they are working in, what's happening in the environment, who else supplies to them. That could be another question that would come up.
And even checking within your own contacts, is there anyone who knows that industry? Is there anyone who can give you some indication of, what the concerns are and what the other party might be looking for?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So far, Wendy, you've shared some really great advice on how we can change, I guess, our approach to negotiation and what we should be doing in terms of the actual mechanics of it and the questions we ask. But I guess it's not always going to work out the way that we expect. And you mentioned the word boundaries, and you also mentioned when to walk away. What would be examples when it would be a good time to understand, well, no, we shouldn't proceed with this?
Okay, so there's going to be quite a widespread. If you're going to be entering in a longer term relationship, then somewhere it's important to know that you share the same values and that there's that mutual respect. Versus if it's a potentially one-off, but even there, there's referrals and things like that can follow you. So, your own values, your own boundaries are important, but equally understanding theirs, to understand what they're prepared to look at and not. But at the end of the day, it's going to be your decision whether to go ahead and your decision about whether having this relationship matches the values of your business and whether you want other customers to see this relationship continuing. Because relationships that are perceived by others as not healthy, again, could impact your customer base.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we underplay the importance of how we're perceived by our current customers and also potential customers in terms of who we actually deal with. I have heard business owners talk to me about how they won't deal with a particular supplier because of the way they treated somebody they knew, or they won't deal with a particular supplier because of the ethics of that supplier in terms of how they operate and who they deal with and who some of the people they supply to. So we do need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely, because your reputation is, in most businesses, your reputation is really important, and it's what carries you forward. And if there is a negative perception on that because of who you dealt with, or because of what they then spoke about out in public about you, that can do a lot of damage to your reputation and your business. And so that's where sometimes you do make the decision to walk away because you just can't see how engaging with that person's going to help your business.
Yeah, important to know that when to move, when to walk away, and when to proceed. So we've talked about how to proceed and get a better outcome for both parties. We've also talked about when to walk away. But we started talking at the beginning of our conversation today, talking about a third alternative or a best alternative to an agreement. I've got a few ideas, but I want to hear from you in terms of what are some of the alternatives to either proceeding or walking away.
Some of the alternatives, I guess they're varied and depends on the situation. One might be actually getting some support in managing this, because when you're in it, the other party's in it, often you just can't see exactly where it might lead. So sometimes getting some support by talking to a trusted friend or a professional person to check your thinking, check your reasoning, your logic, and actually be sure that when you're actually going in, you are looking broadly, but you're confident of what you need out of this. And that sort of preparation can put you in a very strong footing.
Mm-hmm. So using your network, your mentors, your executive coach as a sounding board for whether you are on the right track or raising any doubts at that point, and just walking through the issues at that point with somebody that you do trust and will give you reliable feedback.
Absolutely, and them helping you to by pointing out what you're not talking about, by pointing out what you're not thinking through, or by actually challenging you. If this is what you want, is it even possible to get that from this sort of customer?
Yeah.
Because it may be that they've got a broader view and can say to you, well, can't see how that would be worthwhile for your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great outcome, because you don't want to go into a relationship where, well, I won't say it's doomed from the start, but it's not going to be in the best interest of both parties. And I'm guessing on that, maybe even the timing might not be ideal. So the timing might be, it's not a great idea to do it now, but maybe when your business has developed and you have actually got this in place, then we should talk about proceeding together.
Absolutely, and that can be a really good call, because there's no, the relationship stays intact, your reputation stays intact, and when the later comes, especially if you can see where this person might be going and that right now is not a good time, they're more inclined to come back to you because you built that trust of being very open with them.
And I think being upfront and honest about that and saying, look, we don't think this is the right time. I guess you avoid, leading somebody on and dragging them along, and trying to force an issue, being upfront and saying, well, hang on, let's come back and revisit this at a later time. When can we schedule this in? To even just have a conversation and say, have things changed? Or, what is now a good time to discuss?
Absolutely, and that walking away but checking back in, you probably would get an open reception, because if by then things have played out, they may appreciate the fact that you stepped back and have realised by then it was the best for them at that time. And that's when, the trust is there, your reputation is there, where you're not going to just do anything to get a sale or whatever it was you're negotiating about, but you're more concerned about their overall position.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, Wendy, you shared some really good advice with us today, some great tips and some resources. Would you mind just telling us the best way that our listeners can get in touch with you or follow you, and anywhere that they should look for more guidance on this topic?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. And so, if people want to get in touch with me, it's a good point. But I'd also recommend looking for, a coach at times. Some of the guidelines there is just find someone who's a member of a recognised organisation. The biggest organisation is International Coaching Federation. And, there's a lot of keeping up your professional competencies. The ethics are very strong, and there's actually redress if you feel that the relationship's not a good one. So just look for someone who's professionally certified to work with you, and they are, I guess, going to bring something to you rather than making the situation worse. If that's not affordable or, it's too challenging, look for a trusted advisor. Often that can be a more senior person who's seen it all in business, or someone who's looking on from the side, as not directly involved in your type of business, who can think broader and bring challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of key resources there, and we'll share the links to those in the show notes. And appreciate your time today, Wendy, and the advice you've given. It's been very beneficial. And look, if you are a small business owner, or a small business owner that would benefit from hearing this, please share the episode with them, either through their favourite podcast player or on YouTube. And spread the message about how we can make businesses, I guess, more effective and more efficient, and achieve better outcomes for business owners all around. So, Wendy, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Paul.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.